So hello and welcome to another edition of High Tech Connect interviews with some of them celebrities. Today we have Sanjay Srivastava. I'm sure I mispronounced it. Hi Sanjay, how are you? Good morning.
I'm very well, thank you, Ralph. It's good to see you. Thank you for having me here.
Sure, yeah. So Sanjay is the Chief Digital Strategist at Genpact, formerly GE, General Electric, digital transformation leader. I think you guys have more than 100,000 employees, obviously dating back to your GE time. Today, we are going to talk about the challenges in digital transformation projects, and Genpact is a leader for that, as I mentioned, and Sanjay in particular. So Sanjay, maybe you introduce yourself a bit, your professional background and your digital transformation project, just briefly, before I maybe say something wrong or forget something that's important to you. So.
Well, I'll thank you again for having me here. I'll just start by saying Genpact is a global professional services firm, and we drive digital transformation for large Fortune 500 corporations across the world. We work across many industries, from financial services to high tech, from consumer goods to life sciences in manufacturing. And across those corporations, we take large, complex business processes like finance or supply chain, regulatory compliance or fraud analytics or trust and safety or sales and commercial. And we'll take these business processes, we transform them, we digitize them, we help companies run them and get to better levels of output efficiency and long-term durable, sustainable competitive advantage. My role at the firm, and I've been here about 10 plus years, has been to build the data and the technology and the AI business that fundamentally underwires the transformation we do. And it's been a fantastic ride, and we've become now a large part of the company, but obviously because of where the market is. But previously, before doing this, I was a startup entrepreneur in Silicon Valley and serially built 4 startups, from edge networking to data center automation to predictive algorithms software company to a software as a service corporation, the last of which was acquired by us. So I came here as an accidental tourist, as a startup CEO, coming into a large corporation, and then actually loved what I was able to do and stayed. And part of the reason I stayed is because as a company, I go in the morning and we're operators, right? So we're not advisors, we're not systems integrators, we're not software companies. We actually take and run business processes. So any of the technology I implement, it's on our P&L, it's our skin in the game. But you're able to do it across many different companies, across many different industries, and so you learn a lot, and it's just been a great exercise. So, and I'm based in Seattle, in Washington on the West Coast of the United States. And thank you again for having me here.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask where you're calling in. It's 9 hours, so I thought you're in Silicon Valley, but Seattle, of course, is the same time frame. So 4 startup exits. Wow, that's quite a story, quite a record. I have been also with startups. I think we had out of 4, 1 successful exit. That was quite successful. The other 3, unfortunately, not. So anyway, there would be probably another call worth to discuss your track record. But let's talk about digital transformation today, as promised. So what is actually a digital transformation project, and what is it that the CDO, who typically, I guess, is involved on the large corporate client side, and so what is this all about? Can you give also some examples, maybe make this more concrete? Seems to be a buzzword for many, but I'm sure you have your description for it.
Well, I think I first want to start by saying what it's not. So oftentimes the word digitization or digitalization is seen to be the same as digital transformation, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. And here's what I mean by that. When you digitize something or you digitalize something, what you're doing is you're taking an end-to-end business process, let's say order to cash, and you're breaking it into its individual components across that value chain. And then you're taking every single component and you're digitizing it, or you're automating it, to say. And once you've automated every single component, you actually pull the value chain together into an end-to-end process, and you deliver it. That is digitization. That is automation. It's actually fantastic. It's faster. It's probably cheaper. It's better. It's more scalable, higher quality, but it is not digital transformation. The thing about
Okay.
digital transformation is you first start with that value chain, with that process, and you reimagine the value you need to deliver. You re-engineer the business processes around that. You bring in new frontier tech that wasn't around 20, 30 years ago when you put your IT infrastructure in place, and you use that now to completely transform that component. And then you assemble something together that actually ends up looking very different from what you started with. It isn't just better, faster, quicker, cheaper version of what you used to do. It's a completely different transformed process, so much so that your human colleagues that used to do a set of work are actually now doing an entirely different set of work in the new reimagined state. And so your operating model changes, your resourcing needs to change, your skilling needs to change, your business processes need to evolve, your value exchange changes, the experience you deliver changes. And so when you do all of that, you've actually digitally transformed it, but it isn't the same as automation or digitization or digitalization. And the biggest thing about this is that in digital transformation, tech is no longer the long pole in the tent. It's actually about technology, but then building a foundation of data, then having the people, which is the operating model, the resourcing, the skilling right, and the process, the end-to-end design, the experience, and how it integrates into upstream and downstream. And all of those things need to be done. And so just to summarize what it means, Ralph, is for this chief digital officer, the role is entirely different. It isn't one of automation. It isn't one of digitization. It's one of transformation. And so as a CDO, you're spending time with stakeholders, with your counterparts and business units. You're actually at the table reimagining what the business needs to be. Obviously, on the back of new technology and data you'll bring in, but the conversation starts with business, not with tech.
Right, right. So, of course, one reason why we have this conversation today, and why I picked it as a topic for High Tech Connect this year, is that many of these digital transformation, I call it now, projects fail. I mean, that's what you can read out there. I'm myself not an expert, but many would confirm that who are experts, and that, of course, the CDO, who's then typically responsible for that, fails in some way as well. So you feel sorry for them, and what is it that makes it actually so challenging that many of them don't come out well?
I think that one of the biggest challenges and therefore requirements in a CDO, and it's a very hard thing to get right, is to be an outside-in person and an inside-out person. Here's what I mean by that. You have to be an outside-in individual. You have to understand new frontier tech, emergence of new capabilities like generative AI right now, but there's others that will come and have come in the past. You have to work with the venture capital industry to understand where the investments are going in. You have to work a little bit with labs and incubators to see what the arc of technology is going to look like. And then you have to reimagine with those external inputs outside the four walls of your company, outside the boundaries that define the problem you're currently in, to really bring in that outside-in thinking. And you must be really strong in that, which means you have to spend enough time on that, which means you have to get engaged with the external world, which is obviously around how you choose to use your calendar time. But that's not enough. That's only half the equation. The other half of the equation is, because you're driving transformation, and because it is a grounds-up movement, which is to say that everything changes as a result of that, you need the stakeholdership. You need the understanding of the business. You need to understand the nuance of the ecosystem and the partnerships. You need to understand your business processes inside out so you can actually transform them. And you need to have the championship and the stakeholdership of the organization. And the only way you get there is because you have the credibility, which is to say you spend enough time as an inside-out person, right? You have to understand the inside to be able to go inside out. And so that's one of the largest challenges, and why many of these projects end up being so challenged, because you have to balance the outside-in person or personality or inputs with an inside-out person or personality or inputs. And getting that balance right is often very hard to do.
Yeah,
I
understand.
Give you an example, Ralph.
Sure. Yeah,
so we work across so many amazing corporations. And as I said, I love my job because I get a chance to really become an operator or get involved at the, hip to hip with the leading CIOs, CTOs, and CDOs of the world. And I'll just pick one example, and I'll pick an example in the pharmaceutical industry. If you think about what's happening in pharmaceuticals, medicine, the way it is built, discovered, built, manufactured, and delivered is going to completely change. Today, you and I go to a pharmacy, you might go to a chemist in your neighborhood. The manufacturers built these medicines, they've stocked it, they've shipped it to wholesaler, to distributor, to actually the retail pharmacy. And you go in and you pick up a set of tablets and you come back home. That's the way I consume medicine today. But that world is changing. And it's changing into a world of precision medicine. So as we think about the leading corporations, and I'm thinking about one of our clients as an example, they're going from being a top 10 manufacturer of medicine to a top 5 manufacturer of precision medicine. And here's what that means. That means that nothing is built ahead of time. They're going to take a sample of my blood, my DNA, and that'll be shipped back to the manufacturer. They're going to look at my DNA and they're going to mix a cocktail of drug that is specific to me. That'll then get shipped out to me, and it'll be put in my arm within 48 hours from when it's built. Now, this is the new world of medicine. This is where medicine is headed. But think about it from a digital transformation process. You were a manufacturing company that was stocking at mass and distributing and warehousing and putting it in these pharmacies. And you've gone completely to the other end, where you're taking a sample, you have to track with a digital twin that it's the authentic sample, that it actually belongs to me. And then you have to track the entire manufacturing process, the distribution process, and the delivery mechanism to make sure that it goes back into me. And you have to redesign all of that with digital, with data, with digital twins, with the telemetry, with the discovery components. All of that has to be done on the back of data and technology, but also people and process. And so that's the kind of transformation we're driving. And you can quickly see it isn't about technology. It's actually about technology changing the way you run as a company.
Right. So with this example, we have pharmaceutical companies in Switzerland, many of them, yes, of course, some of the biggest ones. But this is a scenario that will probably take, 10 years, 20 years. So it's not going to happen this year all, but it's definitely the future. And then, for the good of the people. So how do you typically approach such projects? They are complex, obviously, requires a lot from the in-house CDO, but you as an outsider, of course, it may be even more. How do you approach this? What are some of the, without now giving up to our presentation, the key things that you guys are starting with and that you're doing to make hopefully the whole project successful?
Here's the number one thing I would tell you. Do not start with the answer first, okay? Start with the question and stay with the problem longer than you're comfortable, and then bring in the technology to make it happen. I'll give you another example, and I won't go into pharmaceutical, I'll go into something you and I can relate to, because we're consumers and we eat fruit every day. And if you don't, you should. One of the CTOs that I work very closely with is at a firm that is the leading producer of berries. So think about strawberries and other berries that you might buy and distribute it globally. And it turns out that unlike other fruits, bananas or apples or others, a berry is the ripest, it's the best to eat the day it is picked. Many of the fruits are picked when they're not fully ripe, and then they're transported, and by the time it shows up to their grocery store and then on your kitchen table, it's exactly right to eat. Not the case with berries. Berries are the best to eat the day they are picked. And so the challenge with berries is you actually have to have a very small supply chain, like a really short supply chain, literally from farm to table. Berries are a very large business globally, and many of us don't appreciate this. When I first got involved, I realized the berries that I buy locally this week might have been produced, for instance, in Mexico. I live in the United States. The berries I'll buy 4 weeks from now will actually have come from Peru. And so the idea is that you standardize the plant, you work out the DNA, and the companies actually own the DNA of the plant, but they give it out to farmers, and then you follow the sun, or you follow the season. So March, you produce some way, April, you produce some way, May, And every week you go and buy, and it's the same, looking berries, but they've come from different parts of the world based on the seasonality of where you are. Now, here's the challenge with berries. The problem was that it takes a lot of effort to pick them. And if you are, for instance, in Mexico, and the berries are getting ripe and they're getting riper and they're just right tomorrow, okay? But unfortunately, today we just had a World Cup game. No one is going to show up to work tomorrow to actually pick any berries. That crop is going to go to a waste. And so to get the forecast of when that berry is going to be the ripest, the day that it has to be picked, is a really expensive problem. It's a really high return problem, right? Because you get the date wrong, picked it too early, too late, you didn't pick it at the right time, you wasted a lot of food, right? And if you do it right, then you can plan, you can forecast, all this sort of stuff. And the traditional way was you sample and do this and all that sort of stuff. But once you stare at the problem and you start with a large business problem that has a direct dollar revenue, P&L impact, right? So you start with something really big, and then you say, okay, how do I transform this? And to cut a long story short, in this case, they're using AI, artificial intelligence, computer vision. So you take a little small plot of that berry land and you put some cameras in there, and now you're actually recording every day how the berries are kind of maturing, how the plants are growing. And then you apply artificial intelligence to essentially predict which day, next Friday or 2 weeks from now, on this specific date, the berry is going to be the ripest. And then you forecast, and then you plan, and then you get your labor right, the picking process right, you get the distribution right, you get the warehousing right. So the point in this was, you didn't start saying, hey, artificial intelligence is really happening. What do we do? Where do we apply it? That's not the way to approach the problem. You start with the question, you start with the problem, you understand the business use case, you understand how big the returns might be. And then you take a step back and say, okay, we're going to transform the forecasting mechanism for berries at different countries in the world at different points in time. How do we rethink that? And then you start bringing in technologies and machine learning, it's data foundations, it's artificial intelligence, it's generative AI, and putting that into place. And so that's probably the first thing I would tell you, because most CTOs, by the way, I came to this job as a tech person 10 years ago. That was my background. That's what I really loved and enjoyed and still have a lot of passion for. But you come to realize that actually this role is very different. It isn't just about technology. It's actually about changing and transforming. And you start with the business problem, you pick the right problem, and then you really work it at a ground level.
Right. Okay. So from pharmaceutical to picking grapes or berries. Yeah. Thanks for this broad scope of examples. So you're dealing with big companies. Big companies, of course, serve lots and lots of customers and have these processes for decades running, and they're not well known for suddenly doing changes, right? Because their business is to serve and optimize all these customer processes. So what can these companies essentially do if they are faced with bringing in such transformations? Since that's usually doing something new for them radically is very, very difficult, much more than obviously for small, medium size, and of course much more for startups who have to do something new. Otherwise, they wouldn't be present. Yeah.
I think a lot of change management. I think change management has become one of the most important parts of getting your job right. I'll give you a third example, and I'll go to another industry. We work across so many of these amazing use cases. This will be in the tech industry, as software as a service, a SaaS corporation. As you know, sales is a large part, revenue is what drives the bottom line in corporations like this. And part of revenue is forecasting where you're going to end up. Where will you end up this week? Where will you end up at the end of the month? Where will you end up at the end of the quarter, right? These are really important things. And if you're doing it at scale at a large corporation with lots of salespeople across the world in different geographies, in different client conversations, getting as a CFO an aggregate view of where you're going to end the quarter is a really hard thing to do, but is one of the most critical things to get right. So in this case, what we're talking about is actually using generative AI, which is a newest and perhaps the most talked about field of artificial intelligence. Now, we do a lot of work across deterministic AI and probabilistic AI, but this is generative AI. And the use case or the idea here was, in that corporation, they have implemented generative AI that runs on top of the emails that'll go from the salespeople to the client and back. Right now, there's a lot of other considerations around data and privacy and all that will come to separately. But the fundamental idea is instead of waiting for the salesperson at the end of the week, maybe next month, whenever he or she gets time to go in and enter a forecast for the client, right? And it's subjective and it doesn't come in when we need it. And it's hard to sort of figure out. Now using artificial intelligence to read the intent of those messages, to understand the tone of the conversation, to use historical understanding of that conversation to be able to really start predicting what is the probability of sale and what is the date by which it's going to close. And now started generating forecasts based on that, right? Now, the idea is that it doesn't replace the forecast that humans are putting together, right? But what it does is it puts a number on the table. And now as a salesperson, you can take it, you can change it, you can expand it, you can constrict it, and you have to give reasons, right? Every time you give a reason saying, well, I don't believe this because actually the AI is learning from that conversation and it's getting better, right? And so when you implement something like that, what you find out is that it's not accurate. It's not, one of the things about AI is it's on a journey from being directionally correct to specifically accurate. Today, it is directionally accurate. Directionally correct. What it needs to be is it needs to be specifically accurate. And that journey is the journey of change management, of learning with human feedback, right? So at a corporation like this, when you implement it, it's like, I don't believe it. Like, this is not the right number. It doesn't work. And the thing that we had to realize is that artificial intelligence doesn't have to be 100% right. It just has to be less wrong than humans on the average. Right. And that is change management, right? That you have to distill in the organization. You have to drive a culture of change. You have to get people to understand that and then start adopting it and then using it and then feedbacking into it and improving it. And that cycle kind of gets better. And so there are other challenges and issues when you deploy something like this, but I want to give you a very forward-leaning example of a tech company that is embracing generative AI in a very lean and forward. And even there, they're having challenges getting it adopted. And so that's why I come back to the point I made earlier. Change management is the key to success.
Right, yeah. So I actually jumped at the topic that I wanted to bring up is this large language model things that now, of course, everyone talks about a huge adoption, record adoption in tech history. So you already said that it's applied. You guys seem to be super fast coming out. Immediately you apply it to customer scenarios. But how do you see this discussion going on? Is what is the real promise of these large language models? You can also read about folks saying, well, it's too expensive, right? It consumes too much energy, and so forth, and maybe it's not as much as a breakthrough as the tech folks wanna let us know. I checked it out myself. I was quite impressed, but of course it has its limitations. But bringing this into, and that's actually my question, bring this into a big corporation is yet, of course, a complete other challenge, because you have intellectual property rights issues, there is security, there is privacy, and lots of other things. And then you say it must be better than humans, but of course sometimes it's not accurate, and maybe then you still use it. So how are you guys dealing with this, and how are you applying with this? And do you see this as a huge breakthrough indeed, as it seems, or less so?
Well, you've asked a lot of good questions. I'm just trying to think in my mind how to best organize
large language models.
Maybe I'll say three things. The first thing is more philosophical and higher level, and it's something that's been said before. But I think it's very true for generative AI, which is we are overestimating the value and the contribution of generative AI in the short term. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of noise, everyone's focused on it. And I think we're overestimating in the near term, in the short term, the value we're going to get. But I will tell you, Ralph, we are absolutely, unequivocally, for certain, definitively underestimating the impact it's going to have in the long run. It is a systemic change that's going to come through, and we are big believers in what comes through. So that's the first thing I'll tell you about generative AI. It is something to take and ChatGPT knows captured people's imagination. Put that aside for 1 second. The idea of large learning models that are tuned to the domain and specifics of a pharmaceutical or a banking or a credit or a consumer goods industry, and being able to actually reason at a human level or of conversation is actually truly contributive. And so it's going to change the way the world works. So I'll tell you that as the first thing. The second thing I'll tell you is that too much of the attention right now is on generative AI. And actually, generative AI is one tool in a larger toolbox. Okay. The machine learning, there's other elements of AI that have actually, we've been doing it for a while. Text extraction, computer vision, so many different things we've been doing for a while. And it's kind of like, if you think about it, if you had a toolbox and we suddenly invented a screwdriver, right? And up through today, we had these things that were screws and these wooden blocks, and we went out in carpentry. We didn't know what to do with it. We used a plier to wrench it out. We used a hammer to try and break it, and it kind of didn't really work. So we started cutting those pieces of wood and throwing that away and putting a new piece of wood because we didn't know how to deal with a screw. And we just then now invented a screwdriver. And think about the excitement, the energy, and the motivation. And my God, now we have something that we can just put in there and it'll automatically open up the screw. I mean, like, what an amazing thing. And that's the world we are in. But we mustn't forget that to a carpentry job, we bring not just the screwdriver, but a whole toolbox of other components. And so is the case with AI. With applying artificial intelligence to business problems, you must think about it much more holistically and not get fixated by the latest thing that's gotten your attention, but to think more broadly about all of the components. And most of the problems that you're solving is with that generative AI use case I gave you about sales forecasting. It's using machine learned models from years ago. It's using text extraction, which is computer vision that reads a PDF and converts it into a structured language. It's using, obviously, generative AI to pick the tone and the intent and the conversation and the nuance of it. But it's a combination of capabilities that get you there, right? And so that's the second thing I'll tell you, because everyone's rushing out of the door to get into generative AI. And actually, what you need to be doing is building a foundation of data, putting together the other components of your toolbox, changing the organizational maturity and the culture to be able to embrace it, and then embarking upon it. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and I just want to address something you said, I'll tell you, Ralph, 6 months ago, I was very concerned about the technology piece of it. And by technology, I mean the technology issues. Data was a big issue. How do you actually contain it, firewall it? How do I even know my data is clean to be able to learn from, right? So cleansing data and getting organized was a big issue. Then there's the issue of data privacy, which is what if my data leaks? What if other people find out about it? Then there's the issue of data sovereignty, which is where is my data kept? Does it meet with compliance requirements today? And where we project regulations to be in the future? Because I can't go build all this infrastructure and very soon all the rules change. So you have to really think ahead on where the regulators are going. And then you get into very simple things like, okay, I got my data secure, but how do I make sure I don't train a publicly available large language model with my data? And the next competitor comes up and asks a question, and that publicly available LLM now answers that other person's question, right? And now the discussion is changing not from data to actually prompts. How you ask the question is now becoming the most important skill. It's called prompt engineering. I will tell you soon universities will start giving courses on prompt engineering because it is the hottest part of this of the career growth track. And so these issues, I will tell you, 6 months ago, I would have had a very different view. But I have systematically now seen box after box getting checked off, right? Data privacy is less to almost not an issue. Publicly training data, LLMs with your own data is now not an issue. You just go down the list one by one, the technology is getting solved. And so I think we come to a point in time where as the technology matures, the hallucination rate, by the way, you can track it week by week now. The hallucination rate is kind of falling off very fast, right? So you can see, just project out, you're probably experiencing GPT 3.5 in that chat GPT you were talking about. But think about today, if you're in a large corporation, the work you do is not run GPT 3 or 4. You should be planning for GPT 5 or GPT 6, because the time that'll take for you to get your foundation of data and the cleansed, usable proprietary data, the time it'll take for you to actually embrace, endorse, figure out the business use cases, get the cultural orientation, get the teams engaged, all of that will take a lot of work. And so by the time you do all of that, GPT-5 or GPT-6 will be on the table. And if you extrapolate the improvement we've seen from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, you can just quickly extrapolate what 5 and 6 are going to do. And so my point is this, right, which is tech is no longer the long pole in the tent. Eventually, we think artificial intelligence is going to become commodity. It'll become a commodity item. And what is going to be key to success isn't the AI part, because you can buy it, you can use it, you can pay by the drink. It's going to be your own proprietary data. It's your understanding of your business. It's your relationship with your client. It's your understanding of the business processes and how you orchestrate that into a data platform that is clean and usable, how you orchestrate that into a change management so you can change the business processes, and how you orchestrate that into a value proposition so you are durable, competitive, differentiator over the long run is going to be the key to your success.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. We're coming already to an end. I'd like to maybe close with a fourth use case that I was just reading about this afternoon that you were given an interview about. That is your Formula E activities, right? Where you were collecting data, applied AI, and I think you even won, right? The championship, is that correct? It's quite a success story. Elon Musk should maybe go in Formula E, not into Formula One, as it seems. I don't know. Anyway, that's a different topic. But maybe a nice close still. That's why I bring it up. So was this some sort of marketing, PR thing when you started out with, or did you, and that it evolved into something real, or was it a hard test case, or both? How did you guys get into that? And maybe you can use this as a nice close here and wrap up things.
Well, there was a little bit of marketing. There's a lot of real work. Let me tell you what the marketing part of it is. And it's not marketing in the sense of advertising ourselves. We are very big believers in sustainability. We operate across 30 plus countries around the world. We support the communities that we're actually in part of. And as you look through all of the issues on the table around water and this and that, climate is one of the largest things that is looming on in the world's horizon, and certainly on ours. And so we've been thinking about climate change and what can we do about that. And the opportunity with Formula E, which is the all-electric version of the racing circuit, was to bring visibility and was to innovate on technology today that will go from race cars all the way to the cars you and I drive. I mean, think about things like seatbelt, think about the rear view mirrors. All these innovations came in racing cars and then eventually transformed to the cars you and I drive. And so the idea was that, if electric vehicles is going to be the future of mobility, what are the things we can support now and make it very public, very visible, very quote unquote marketed? And the electric car racing was an obvious one, because it's electric cars driving on the streets you and I drive in downtown locations where you and I live, to really start thinking like, wow, they can do those speeds, so I can drive safely, I can drive normally. And the innovations that we're making on the cars will eventually translate into the cars you and I drive. So that was the quote unquote marketing piece. So less marketing is more awareness. We wanted to focus on something that would really get people more comfortable, right? But the tech is why, at least I got really passionate about it, because you're looking at a racing car, and first thing you do is you put in all the telemetry across 250 data points. So you're picking every signal that comes off the car into a data platform. Fundamentally, you can't even take the car out of the garage without that foundation of data, and we build that in place. And then you build the AI, you build the machine learning on top of that to be able to estimate battery performance and how much battery you have left, and therefore what kind of turns you can take. And therefore, at that split second, do you want to overtake someone or not, right? And building the telemetry, building the data infrastructure, and then building the artificial intelligence routines on top of that to, at the moment of inflection, in that split second, give the right advice to the driver on what she or he should be doing. And so it was an amazing technology product, very rewarding to be involved in if you're a technologist, but more importantly, a much bigger program around mobility, the future of mobility, the future of sustainability, and getting it very publicly available so people can see and feel and embrace that change. We've been lucky to be involved in that.
Great. Thanks so much for spending time with me here and answering these questions. Makes digital transformation projects sound much easier than they maybe are in listening to you. Certainly, you're highly passionate about it, which is always required to bring technology to the masses. You have a great day, and thanks again, and all the best for your future digital transformation projects with whatever you're doing next. All right.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take care. Good day.
Sanjay. Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye. Ciao.